Outside of trees, there are other things you can add to your terrain to decorate it. Things like grass or polygon models of things like rocks, stones, bushes, debris, anything you can think of, really, that might need to be scattered across your terrain just to make it seem more realistic. Now, you can access this under the Paint Details tool, which is located second from the end on the right-hand side under your terrain settings in the inspector, or you can hold down Shift and hit the Y key, and that will just bring that right up for you. Now, again, this is very much like when we were painting textures and painting trees. We need to add some form of detail that we can paint down. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on Edit Details, and we can add either a grass texture or we can add a detail mesh. We're going to start off with a grass texture. And for these, all you need is some form of a texture, because what's going to happen is you're going to be painting down a series of small billboard cards that have this texture upon them, and that'll give the illusion of grass. So let's start off by picking the grass texture we're going to use. So we'll click on the little load button and scroll down to the letter G, and I'm just going to grab grass 2 here. Double click. Now we have our min and max width. That's exactly as the name suggests. That's how wide the card that gets placed with your texture can be. Same thing with height. It just allows for a little bit of randomization. And you can change these after the fact if you want to see more or less randomization or more or less size in these values. Next we have noise spread. This controls the cellular size of noise that is applied to the healthy and dry color of the grass. I can actually show that a little more easily once we get some grass placed. And we can control the tint that is applied to healthy grass as well as to dry grass. For now, though, I'm going to leave all of these set to their defaults, click on Add, and then we can take a look at just painting. So if I just click and drag, we are painting down some grass. Now, you'll notice this grass will tend to disappear as you pull away from it. Now, I've got my distance set pretty high, and we'll talk about the settings that you can change to make that grass visible or invisible at different lengths in a separate video. For now, we're just going to stick to the painting process. So here we are looking at our grass. Now, notice there are some patches that are starting to turn brown, as if there, I don't know, some oil deposits or something kind of nasty taking place underneath the soil here. But if we select our grass and go to Edit Details and choose Edit, you can see what this is. This is controlled by the healthy color and the dry color of the grass, which again are like tints. So if I was to set our dry color to something like red, then you see what that's doing. It's just tinting our grass with an overall red color. And the same would also be true of our healthy color. So if I click there and I set this to something like blue, then we're tinting our grass with blue, but the mix here is going to push that more toward black, because as you can see, we've already got kind of a basic yellow color, and the two aren't going to mix very well. Now I could set it to red, and that shows up really well. But if you really wouldn't want to do that to realistic grass in the first place. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that down, and let's take a look at that noise spread value. By default, this is set to 0.1, and that's controlling that cellular size. Now, to really drive home how this is changing, I'm going to take my dry color and set this down to something a lot darker so that you can see a really nice contrast between the two. And as I increase my noise spread, watch what happens to that dry and healthy pattern back there in the background. We'll kick this up to 0.5, and you'll see that those cells become a lot tighter. Take it all the way up to 1, and you can really get some tight variation in there. And this may be close to what you might be looking for if you really wanted to get a lot of noise buried in your grass, or if you're just looking for some gentle rolling changes, so to speak. You can adjust this value. Now, this is some really densely placed grass. I'm going to pull back a little bit, hold down Shift, and remove this. And let's talk a little bit about the brush itself. Of course, we have brush size, which is fairly obvious. We can choose our brush shape by clicking on any of these presets. But we also have our opacity and target strength, which in this case are cranked all the way up, and that is going to place our grass very densely on the ground. And in a lot of cases, you probably don't want to do this, because this is probably a lot denser than you really need. And you got to remember that adding all this extra geometry will come at a performance cost. So we'll go ahead and just pull this down really, really low and paint again. And you can see we still get a nice grassy look. And as I tap the space bar by accident, if we were down here around where the player actually sits, this still looks very grassy, even though it's not using anywhere near the amount of grass we were dropping down previously.
Right. Once again, it's another thing that you want to place very carefully to get the balance between performance and the look that you're going for.
And we're not limited to just placing down grass textures. We can also put down meshes to be used for various details. So if I click back over on my edit details, we can now add a detail mesh instead of a grass texture. Now let's load this up, and we don't have a whole lot to choose from here, but we do have our rock mesh. So I'll double click that. Now noise spread, all of the random width and height work just like they did before. Random width and height will be nice for this rock. It'll allow us to get a nice amount of variety in the sizes of the rocks we paint. So I'm going to set this to 5 by 5 so we can get some fairly large rocks. Dry and healthy color will also be applied. So if you don't want your meshes to be tinted between green and yellow, be sure to change these. I'm going to take the healthy color, and set that up to white so we're not really tinting by anything. And then we'll take the dry color and I'll set that to kind of a medium gray. So it'll just darken some of the rocks as we drop them. Next, our render mode can be set to either vertex lit or grass. Since we're actually doing a mesh, we need to set this to vertex lit and click add. Now this works just like painting down grass. All we have to do is select the actual mesh here and then click paint, and we start getting some rocks. Now there are a lot of rocks being dropped and stacked down to create this look. You can kind of see the cracks and crevices between them. And that may or may not be what you're looking for. So to pull that down, you really need to fine-tune your opacity and your target strength. And there you go. There's a lot fewer rocks. Now keep in mind, these rocks will not block the player.
Right. They have no colliders attached to them. And even if you were to put a mesh in here that had a collider on them, the detail part of the terrain will ignore those colliders altogether.
Right, so you just kind of have to be careful about how you place them. And then if you needed these features to block the player, you need to add in some colliders on your own a little later. Now I do want to throw out this kind of a tip. If you get really freaky with your values and you set your opacity and your target strength way too high, you can start noticing some anomalies in how your rocks get added. And so what you get here, you see we've got some clumping. We've got some rocks being put into these little tiny stripes. It's very erratic. And what we have here, I mean, there's just tons of rocks all piled on top of one another. Not ideal. Generally not what you're looking for. And this would be really, really heavy to render. So when you're putting these rocks down, and right now I'm holding down Shift and erasing them, and you can see all kinds of weird behavior taking place. Be sure to be very careful with your opacity and target strength and leave that as low as you can possibly get away with while you're adding in these decorations. So that's a look at painting down extra details, again, such as grass, rocks, or other meshes. That's going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.